Welcome to the TTS Talking Educators podcast. Each week we'll be joined by educational experts from across the globe, offering exclusive insights, inspiration and guidance to help practitioners unlock the potential for learning in educational settings. Hello, my name is Dr. Shaddai Tembo, your host for this week's TTS Talking Educators podcast. I am a senior lecturer at Bath Spa University, an associate lecturer at the Open University, and an independent writer, speaker and consultant through critical early years. Throughout this series, we'll be discussing a range of topics, all aimed at supporting Oracy in primary and early years settings, inspiring you with guidance to enhance your practice. This week, I'm delighted to introduce Amy Gaunt as our guest. Welcome to the podcast, Amy. How are you today?
Hi, Shaddai. Thank you. Yeah, I'm good.
Brilliant. And before we get started, perhaps you could just give a short introduction about yourself for our listeners.
Yes, I am Director of Learning, Impact and Influence at Voice 21. Voice 21 are the national Oracy education charity, so we work with schools to support them to embed high-quality Oracy education. We're working with approximately 1,100 schools this year to support them to embed vital Oracy school skills into teaching and learning, the curriculum and wider school life. Before that, I was a primary school teacher with a real sort of passion for Oracy, teaching both in London and also internationally.
Excellent. So to round up our fourth and final episode, we'll be looking at where parents fit within the puzzle. So Amy, my first question is, what role can parents play in supporting Oracy? Where do they fit within the overall Oracy puzzle? And how can teachers support them in practice?
Yeah, so first thing to say is that parents sort of overwhelmingly support a greater focus on Oracy at school. So as part of the Oracy Education Commission that Voice 21 hosted last year, we conducted some YouGov polling. Yeah, and we found that over 80% of parents really supported a greater focus on Oracy at school. So we know that this is something that parents really welcome. I think when we talk to Voice 21 Oracy schools about how they sort of interact and how they work with parents on Oracy, what we sometimes hear is that parents are unfamiliar with the term Oracy. So I think if you're trying to kind of get parents on board, get them invested and engaged, probably the first thing to do is to make sure they know sort of what on earth it is that you're talking about. So lots of our schools will do sort of parent workshops where they'll introduce the idea of Oracy, they'll talk about some of the strategies, the different things that their child will be doing as part of a focus on Oracy in schools. So I think that's a really useful and valuable first step. And then I think another thing that schools can do is really thinking about how they're using their parents to support a focus on Oracy. So particularly if you're working in a school where there's lots of different languages spoken at home by parents, different dialects, for example, it's great to get those parents into school and to use them to support that focus on Oracy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that statistic that you shared at the outset, it really shows that parents do care about Oracy and want to be involved in that. But perhaps there's sometimes this sense that they don't. So I think there's some work there around teachers really making sure that parents are included, and just spoken about a range of strategies in which to involve them. I'm wondering about the learning that's taking place around purposeful Oracy talk in the schools, and what strategies teachers can use to make sure that learning is being sustained in the home environment as well.
Yes, there's lots of different things that teachers can do and that schools that we're working with do. I think an important thing to say is that it's really important to think carefully about the messaging that you're sending home around Oracy to parents. I think it's really important to avoid this sense that you're saying to parents, oh, you're not doing this enough, or you need to do this better, because that's not the message that we want to be sending about Oracy. We want parents to feel included in the school's focus in Oracy, but we don't want to be saying to parents, like, you're not talking enough or in the right way with your child, because I don't think that will be very sort of beneficial. So some of the things that schools that we work with do to kind of continue that focus that's happening on Oracy in the classroom and getting that to kind of continue at home and helping parents to feel involved. Schools sometimes will send talking homework. So I know parents really value these. I think sometimes getting your child to do, their homework and a page of calculations or whatever printed off from, some website can be quite tricky. I know that as a parent on a Sunday night, sometimes you're like, so sending home talking homeworks is really welcomed by parents. So giving them like a talking point, something interesting to talk about, to have that conversation in home and at home, and then making sure that children can then come in and share sort of that conversation that they had at home in the classroom as well, is something that's really effective. Sparking that sort of that talk about learning and what happens in the classroom as well is something that's really welcomed by parents. I know, like personally, when my child goes to school, he comes out and I'm like, what did you learn today? What did you do? And he sort of says, oh, nothing. And that's all I hear. So schools have tried some really sort of innovative ways to get children talking about what they're learning at school. So sometimes sending them home with like a sticker that says, ask me about something, and then something kind of interesting and intriguing that they've learned about school. And that's really effective to sort of drive those kind of sparky conversations about learning at home as well. So yeah, there are a couple of strategies that our schools are using and which are quite successful.
Yeah, and as you're talking now, I'm thinking about something I know is on a lot of parents' minds at the moment with regard to digital technology. I often think that parents will be wanting support from their schools, not to say that they're doing anything wrong, but really just to look for advice about how they, as parents, can manage children's use of digital technology, and perhaps there's an intersection with Oracy there.
Yeah, no, there's definitely something that we're hearing a lot from the schools that we're working with, that parents and teachers as well are increasingly worried about sort of screen time, devices, and that might be having an effect on students' Oracy skills. That polling that I mentioned earlier, I can't remember the exact same statistics, but certainly parents and business leaders who we polled were both worried about the impact of sort of technology on children's kind of Oracy skills. So I think it is something that parents are worried about. So it's something that's worth schools and teachers addressing. I don't think there are any sort of easy answers necessarily. I think that there's lots of ideas that you can provide for, talk focused kind of activities that don't involve a screen, and it's worth sort of thinking about what those are, sharing those with parents. But yeah, it's definitely something that teachers and parents are sort of concerned about, that's worth thinking about.
Absolutely. Having reflected on parents, and we've also spoken about the curriculum and all of those different strategies that we can employ with young children to support their Oracy skills, it's a lot of work. It's a real mission and a journey for these schools. So I'm wondering about third sector organisations like Voice 21 and others that can come in and help schools. What's it been like working with schools to do that work, and what would you suggest to a school who perhaps are at the start of their journey and wanting to develop more of an Oracy rich curriculum within their school?
Yeah, so we've grown quite quickly. When we first started, we were working in one school and have grown quite rapidly. And, we've worked with, I think, in total over 2,000 schools, and kind of currently working with about 1,100, 1,200 next year. So I guess the point of that is to reflect on, actually, this is something that schools think is really, really important. It feels like, now there's starting to be more of a focus on Oracy and policy, but it really feels like there's this kind of groundswell of support from schools. It's something that, you speak to teachers, you speak to head teachers, they know this is something that's really, really important. There's not enough emphasis on it in the curriculum, but schools sort of just know that it's important, but they often don't know kind of how to go about kind of implementing a focus on Oracy in their schools. They don't know how to kind of improve their Oracy provision. So at Voice 21, we've provided lots of tools that schools can use. So we have the Oracy benchmarks, which we talked about in a couple of the other podcasts, which is really, really useful for schools to kind of think about your provision in the round. There's a kind of assessment tool at the back that you can use to kind of identify what your strengths are. And I think if, there will be strengths in your classroom or across your school. If you're a school leader, there will be lots of great practice that's happening. You might not call it Oracy yet, but there will be like pockets of great things that are happening. And often it's just about kind of deliberately thinking about some of those things, adding in and building on that to build out this kind of really effective kind of provision across the whole school. So first thing I would encourage you to do is to go on the Voice 21 website, download our Oracy benchmarks, read those, and sort of evaluate the practice that's happening across your schools. We've got a bunch of other sort of free resources, reports and stuff that you can access as well. We do also work with schools in a more intensive way. So we have a programme called Voice 21 Oracy Schools. Schools join us for at least 3 years typically, and they work towards becoming what we call an Oracy Centre of Excellence. So I guess another thing to flag to schools is that this can't be something that's on your school development plan for, a term. It's going to take, it takes a kind of sustained focus over a number of years. So yeah, we work with schools for a number of years. We work with their teachers to upskill their practice. We work with their leaders to support them to develop a really coherent plan to develop Oracy across their schools. So yeah, come and find out more about Voice 21.
Yeah, it's great to hear that you have a 3-year kind of process working with schools. I know from working with schools and earlier settings that trends come and go, and some things seem really important at one moment and then less important at another moment. But for me, it feels fundamental that Oracy is sustained over that longer period, insofar as it intersects with so many different areas, right?
And schools often find that. Often schools will describe it as the golden thread. So they'll often come to us because, they've decided they want to develop their students' vocabularies, for example. So often there's quite a very specific reason why schools approach us. And then as they work with us, that really sort of expands, and suddenly they see, how it intersects with all these different aspects of school life, and how Oracy can be this kind of consistent thread that runs through. And it's a really great way to think, if developing reasoning in maths, for example, is also on our school development plan, actually Oracy has a really important role to play with that. So it can be really useful for school improvement because it's something which supports lots of different areas of school life.
Yeah, I love that idea of it being a golden thread. That's really key as a takeaway. We're coming to the end now, so I'm just wondering about your vision. What would you like to see from schools across the country in the next 5 years with regard to their commitment to Oracy? What would an Oracy-rich society look like for you? I'm really interested in the long-term consequences of this.
So that's a really big question. I guess there's sort of two parts, isn't there? I think at the school level, I want to see not just, a few thousand schools focusing on Oracy. I want it to be an entitlement for every child. I think it's really, really important that it is a normal part of every child's education, that it's not something that's kind of exceptional. It's something that it's completely normalised. All children sort of get it. I think that's really, really important. And I think it is within our grasp. I'm really hoping that's what's going to happen over the next 5 years. That's a key part of Voice 21's sort of new strategy that we'll be launching later this year. In terms of a society benefits, an Oracy-rich society, I think that's hugely important. I think what we want are children that are coming out of school with the confidence, that sense of agency, where they feel like they can, advocate for themselves and others. I think Oracy at school has got a really big part to play in countering sort of polarization that we're seeing at the moment. I think we want children that are coming out of school really able to kind of talk about their own opinions, to listen to other people. I think it has a really important part to play in society.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the theme I'm hearing throughout all of these episodes around Oracy is the way in which it unsettles the power relationship between teachers and students and parents, and actually that focus on Oracy really empowers children to participate and also empowers parents to have more of a say in the matters in the child's schooling life. So, would that be fair to say that there's an unsettling of the power in that focus on Oracy?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what we want, is about, power, confidence, agency, and how we equip our young people with that. I think that's what schools should be.
Mm-hmm. And there's also something there about advocacy. As you said earlier on, there perhaps isn't the focus on Oracy that we would like in policy frameworks at the moment. But with the groundswell and the work that you're doing and the more teachers that are being trained in this, there's a real need for us all to stand up and have a voice around Oracy and really speak about the importance of it for young children's lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we see with the schools that we work with. They come with us because they want to embed Oracy within their context and within their setting. And I think when they see the benefit of that, the impact that has across their setting, they become real sort of advocates for Oracy. And we've got teachers and school leaders that we've worked with over the past years that I see popping up, speaking at conferences, going into their local schools. It really does feel like, we talk about it as the kind of the Oracy mission, but teachers and leaders really do sort of take that on and really value it, and as part of that they want to kind of take it out to other schools. So I think it's also giving teachers and school leaders a voice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So unsettling that power imbalance, giving teachers a voice, children a voice, but also parents too, and really advocating for Oracy. I think that's a really useful place to end this episode. So thank you so much, Amy, for being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you.
I would like to say a huge thank you to our guest, Amy, for joining us and providing us with such valuable insights. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Educators podcast with me, Dr. Shaddai Tembo, and Amy Gaunt. If you've been inspired by our conversation today, don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and to access exclusive follow-up content, including ideas for your settings and links to relevant resources.